Hey everyone, welcome back to Security Unscripted. A lot's been going on, if you haven't noticed. But I'm going to start a little bit earlier. Actually, I was going to do this podcast over the weekend. I'd come back from VulnCon 2025 in Raleigh, North Carolina last week. Fantastic conference, very much focused on the vulnerability ecosystem. We had vendors such as Red Hat, Canonical, a couple others. We had a bunch of scanning vendors, some I'd never heard of, some that I know quite well, and then customers as well who actually run their own product security organizations were present as well to learn and contribute to the entire vulnerability management ecosystem. I was there. I did a talk on VEX, the vulnerability exploitability exchange document format. I did a talk on just the challenges between open source and proprietary software. The equity problem that exists there and how they're not treated the same. But what was interesting to me was the last session on Thursday. We were talking about some of the challenges in the vulnerability ecosystem and ways to make things move forward. And there are a number of great ideas. But I got a little frustrated, in all fairness. And I basically said that the entire vulnerability ecosystem needs an overhaul. CVE needs to be decoupled from the U.S. government, right? The U.S. government via MITRE has been funding and supporting the CVE program for the last 25 years, which has been awesome. The CVE itself is a gift for anybody who's in incident response or vulnerability management. But there are a number of issues that we have right now. So at some point, I think the videos for VulnCon will be available. You'll be able to hear my statement. And one of them, I'll be sure to link that somewhere at some point when it's available. But briefly, what I said was CVE needs to be decentralized in terms of it's not under one particular organization. A foundation should be stood up to manage CVEs itself, and it can be monetized in a number of ways, right? I think there's a unique opportunity for people who are actually beneficiaries of CVE and all that it provides, actually put some skin in the game. You could charge scanning vendors to access an API. You could have vendors who maybe pay dues for premium seats to be part of the board to help with future direction for CVE. There's a number of different things that you could do. I didn't really advocate for any one particular way of moving forward, but just posited that the challenges that we're facing right now are largely of our own making. Having been in this space for 25 years, almost as long as CVE has been around, I know what it looked like before CVE, and I know the many benefits that CVE brought us. Single way of naming a single vulnerability with a single CVE name is huge. So I was basically making that argument, and just to get it into people's minds. And little did I realize that. So that was last week, Thursday. Yesterday, Tuesday, MITRE basically said they're not renewing the funding for the CVE program as of today, April 16th. Did not expect to see that coming. I mean, it was the thing I was advocating for, or at least the idea I was putting forth. I didn't actually expect to see something happen. It was quite drastic. So I was going to do this yesterday, but I decided I'd wait a little bit to see what was happening because I know a lot of wheels were spinning. Full disclosure, I do work for Red Hat. None of this is opinionated or speaking from an official Red Hat capacity. These are all my own opinions. But we do have some representation on the CVE board, and we're heavily involved in the CVE ecosystem. Red Hat does a lot with respect to signing CVEs for open source, for our own products, and also influencing CVE in this direction moving forward because we do see CVE as a global common good. So yesterday, with that news that came out, there a lot of FUD was going around. It's the death knell of the vulnerability ecosystem. Attackers are going to get a leg up now because they're going to have all this information that defenders aren't going to have. Like, none of this stuff is true. So, I mean, to start off on the first place, like, the vulnerabilities are still vulnerabilities. Literally, the CVE dictionary, they call it a dictionary, just names vulnerabilities. Right? That's all it does, is it just names vulnerabilities. You could go to GitHub, put out an advisory, give it a GHSA. Bob's your uncle. You don't have to give it a CVE name. That vulnerability is still known, right? So the impact from an open source perspective, because we've been doing this so long and so well, is probably minimal. It's where you get this information from is going to be the question. Now, the great news is this morning, CISA basically said that they were going to take over that contract, more or less. I think they're going to be paying for it for the next year, so the program will continue as it has been running. This is fantastic news. It buys us time, right? I do think that the notion of a CVE Foundation, which incidentally also released a statement this morning, they exist. Who knew, right? And that's likely where the future of CVE is going to be going, under the guardianship, perhaps, of the CVE Foundation. And I think this is a good thing. I'm not trying to make any claims for what the CVE Foundation is going to do. I'll reiterate maybe what I said last week with respect to what it could do. And maybe that's something that could move forward, and hopefully you'll agree and see kind of what it is that I'm getting at as to why I think it's a good idea. But I think that CVE as a database itself should be agnostic in terms of severity ratings and CVSS scores. This is actually one of the failings of NVD, as far as I'm concerned. The National Vulnerability Database, by its very name, was meant to be a national, one nation vulnerability database, and it was for the U.S. government. And they rated vulnerabilities in random ways. I mean, the prior episode about OBJ dump being bad is one example of where NVD doesn't get it right, and probably isn't qualified to be rating vulnerabilities that they have apparently very little knowledge of. So in terms of severities, like NVD has its critical rating based on the CVSS base score that they provide. CVE.org or the CVE Foundation, whatever that incarnation is going to look like in the future, should absolutely refrain from doing that. They should have no business noting what the severity of a vulnerability is, because they can't know, right? Particularly when we're talking about open source that could be used in multiple operating systems. I mean, if you look at even amongst Linux distributions, right? Red Hat may rate something different than SUSE, may rate it different than Ubuntu. And that's okay, right? Because we build these things differently and we use them in different ways. Even across the Red Hat portfolio of products, you might see something rated a certain way in Red Hat Enterprise Linux and a different way in Red Hat OpenShift container platform. Totally okay. It is because those components are used in different ways. What CVE.org, in my opinion, should do in the future is, again, refrain from a CVSS score, refrain from a severity rating, just facts, right? This is the vulnerability. This is when it was public. Maybe, is there any known exploitation? A cool thing that it could provide is the part of the CVSS base metrics that speak to temporal, right? Like the actual threat landscape with respect to that CV. Is it being exploited? Is there proof of concept, et cetera? What they should allow for is vendors to submit, as they do, like CNA submit right now to CVE, their vulnerabilities, some characteristics around those vulnerabilities, CPEs, Perl, whatever. Allow vendors to continue to do that, and I would encourage all vendors to be able to do that, right? But if I'm the CNA for CVE X, and I put my bit in there saying this is its severity rating, this is its CVSS base score, every other vendor who actually ships that product or that component should be able to provide similar information for their product. So, for example, Red Hat would submit their CVSS base score and their severity rating for, sorry, Daniel, I'm not trying to pick on you, but say for curl, right? We would put our rating for that vulnerability. SUSE would do the same, Canonical would do the same, F5 would do the same, Cisco would do the same. Like everybody who ships curl would put their severity rating for their products on the CVE.org page. And if this page has like 100 vendors listed with their severities, that's okay, right? The real value that I see here is a scanning vendor could then go to the CVE page directly via an API and say, I am scanning this operating system and I'm looking for this CVE information, right? So they'd pull that information directly from CVE.org rather than from each individual vendor's vulnerability feeds. This gives scanners incentive to desire something like this because now they just have to go one place for their vulnerability information. Right? They don't have to guess. They don't have to use NVD scores, which are often wrong and just end up confusing customers, right? They can use the vendor score, which, as per some conversations I had last week, they want to do. They want to provide vendor scores because they acknowledge that that is the right thing to do and it is most appropriate for the thing that they're scanning. charge the scanning vendors access to your API. Make it free, make it available to anybody, but rate limit it. Give the API access to scanning vendors who pay for it, so it's not as maybe heavily rate limited or rate limited at all. This is part of what could fund your foundation, right? And it's a valuable service for these scanning vendors because now they just have to have their code accept one source of input when they're scanning a variety of different containers, operating systems, whatever, right? This is part of your business model. And in that way, any user of any platform could go to CVE.org, filter based on the products that they use or are concerned about, and actually see what the severity ratings are for that vulnerability with no tainting by CVE.org itself. And that would be huge, right? The other part that I think that this would provide a lot of value for is with respect to the CRA. Right? It's no surprise that ENISA is creating the EUVD. I've looked at it. It's very pretty. It looks nicer than CVE.org and nicer than NVD. It's more modern. But the information is identical, with one exception. They provide an EUVD identifier. You can still search by CVE. You'll still see the CVE name, but you'll see an EUVD identifier for that vulnerability. Here's my problem, right? I have PTSD going back to when Security Focus was assigning bug track IDs to bugs, and then there were CVE. Eventually, they stopped because they realized it was unhelpful. The EUVD in its current incarnation that I see right now is equally unhelpful. It has CVE 2024-1234 is equated to EUVD 2024-5678. Why? You have one CVE ID per vulnerability. Presumably one EUVD ID per vulnerability as well. Why aren't they the same number? What is the value of the EUVD anyways, other than to say it's a new thing and it's made in the EU, I guess. That doesn't strike me as value for an end user. Now, customers, consumers, scanning vendors have to do lookups by CVE and EUVD, and it's the exact same vulnerability. That makes no sense. I'm starting to see that now just in the last 24 hours. Other people are reserving blocks of CVEs. This is before CISA's announcement of resuming funding, but reserving a block of 1,000 CVEs. If MITRE's not going to give it to you, I will. Right? I think it was a GCVE or something like that, where they're like, yeah, we're going to just create a whole new program. We tried this before, right? We had the distributed weakness filing system, the DWF, years ago. Where is it today? It didn't make a difference. It wasn't materially different. In this ecosystem, whether we like it or not, CVE is king. Why? Because it changed everything for the better. It provided consistent naming. Do I agree with all the rules around CVE? I mean, no, it should be easy to get a CVE. I mean, we should give out CVEs like candy. It doesn't matter. We have an infinite number we can use, right? We don't have to be so tightly controlled. And maybe that's where a CVE foundation with better rules, better input from the vulnerability ecosystem to provide input in future direction actually helps. So I've gone a little bit longer than I want to. So I'm going to kind of wrap up with this. I don't see this as a problem. Not even a short-term problem, particularly now that CISA, thank you very much, has resumed funding. Right? That's awesome. Very generous of them. Very great. But it does highlight the one big problem. It's too tied to the U.S. government. And it needs to be geopolitically diverse in terms of like, hey, and I don't know how the CVE Foundation is going to do any sorts of funding or whatever, but the U.S. government could fund it. The EU could fund it. Other countries could fund it, right? They're all taking advantage of it. It's a global good. The vendors who pour their information into it and have a vested interest in making sure that it's accurate and useful for the future could pay dues into this foundation, right? To ensure that that happens and that service remains available. We're beneficiaries of that. And the scanning vendors, right? Their job is easier with this information. They could be paying subscription fees for this as well, right? But the point is it's decentralized. It's decentralized and not under any one organizational thumb. It's made up by a foundation, a nonprofit, that covers all of these things. So I think this is a great thing. Not quite the way that I had expected it to go. Certainly not when I was talking last Thursday did I think it was going to land like this, not even a week later. But this is a gift, in my opinion, that we should capitalize on. And I think that a public community good moving forward is exactly within the open source ethos, right? I mean, we are so good at this. We do this all the time. We should be doing this for this, right? Open source is available globally, is used globally. And I mean, CVEs isn't exclusive to open source, but that model works, and that model could work here. So I'm excited, right? I mean, it's been busy. I know a couple of people who've barely slept because we're just keeping up on all the news and inquiries and things like that. So it's a painful transition, but I think it's a good one. And I'm really excited to see where things are going to go in the future. So, that's about all that I've got for today. I'm sure there will be more to come in the days and weeks to come around all of this, but I am hopeful, and I just implore all those who are trying to do the right thing, whether you're making the GCV or the EUVD or whatever thing that you're thinking of doing, please consider, if you haven't been here for 25 years, talk to those of us who have. Competing standards in this place is a terrible idea. We should avoid that at all cost. We want CVE to succeed. CVE is something that everybody knows. It's in everybody's manual. It is one thing, one source of truth it should be, and that's what we want to see moving forward. So with that, I'm going to wrap up. Thank you very much, and we'll see you again next time on Security Unscripted.